Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 92 of the show, and in this edition we're tackling monsters on both the ground and in space in Comic Club as we cast our judgment over WildStorm's 2009 Resident Evil series. My name is Sai, and joining me on the panel this week, conscripted into the BSAA under the elusive title of Sandwich Regulator, it's Michael Burger time early.
I never liked Sandwich Regulator.
Sandwich Verifier, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we had to demote him from the Team Demolition expert role as he kept just shaking up cans of Monster Energy drink. It's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Hi everybody. Hashtag not sponsored.
Not
yet.
sponsored. Every episode of First Aid Spray is recorded live on Discord, so join now to become part of our fantastic community that includes Resident Evil diehards and newbies. If you'd like, you can support the show via our merchandise store or over at patreon.com/FASprayPod for as little as $1 a month. All of this and all our social media links can be found at our website, FASprayPod.com. Speaking of patrons, a quick shout out at the top to our latest supporter, fantastic username, Resident Zeno. You got everyone very happy with that username. James, 2 thumbs up, I think, from that one. So thank you to Resident Zeno. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters who recently got early access into a Moment of Relief episode on the 2024 Horror Gaming in Review. That's out now everywhere for everyone to consume, but we will be having more episodes in the pipeline. As I say, there's some stuff going on behind the scenes. We also unexpectedly dropped a sort of winter special, I guess, talking about comfy games. Just a short little punchy 25-minute episode. So, I mean, it is winter right now, so comfy games are needed. It's freezing cold here today where I am, so definitely get a blanket and a hot mug of cocoa if you haven't listened to that, and check that out. And finally, just a little sort of soft announcement, I guess, is that we now have auditions open for file readings, but not necessarily for the podcast. Obviously, file reading's been a big part of First Aid Spray since the beginning. We have them in every single show, including this one, and we recently talked a lot about turning that into something else and doing something separate with that. So at the moment, we have a casting call club link, and I will put our profile in the description of the podcast if you'd like to go and audition, with most of the files for Resident Evil 1 open for casting. So if you'd like to be a part of that project or future podcast file readings, do keep an eye on social media and our casting call profile. But yes, be quick about it for this project because, yeah, auditions are now open. That's everything from us. Steve, take us into the headlines.
It's like history is repeating itself. Resident Evil 4 Remake becomes the fastest selling game in the series.
Hey, are we bored of talking about sales numbers yet? Again? Are we bored of talking about sales numbers yet? Because I'm not. Yes, this is on top of Resident Evil 4 Remake hitting the 9 million sale mark in its quote-unquote 8th quarter. I think that is going into the 8th quarter because the game came out in March, so it's not officially a year old, 2 years old yet. But Alex O'Neill, who we all know online as CVX Freak, made some fantastic tweets, as always. He always has the stats for this, and some great comparison here, talking about Resident Evil Village, which was previously the fastest-selling Resident Evil game just a few years ago. And importantly, what he pointed out was that around this time, Resident Evil Village had sold 7.9 million, whereas, yes, Resident Evil 4 Remake, having just sold another million in the last quarter, is now up to 9 milli, which pretty much puts it on course to top the franchise bestsellers within the next 12 months, maybe a year and a half tops, I think. That's a prediction, not a spoiler, but I have a good feeling that this is going to knock RE2 Remake, I guess, was keeping the seat warm for Resident Evil Remake 4 on the way to the top. Steve, anything on this? I mean, I don't think we're surprised, I guess.
No, not surprised at all. I mean, even if you don't factor in like 4 Remake's legacy, it's apparently Leon just can't stop taking Leon's crown. So, okay, fair play. Fantastic.
King,
game.
you dropped this.
Yeah,
To himself,
it's
you
that
king.
one Obama meme with the necklace and the medal around the end of
Yeah.
Obama. Yeah.
Thanks for the tweet idea, Steve.
Oh
Yeah.
dear.
No, absolutely. Bergs, any shock from this? I don't think so.
No, not at all. Like, I mean, it is the game that defined a genre for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Lots of people out there who haven't played the original game as well, I'm sure, have picked this up based on the fact that it's just called Resident Evil 4. It's the game everyone talks about, but again.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming, Resident Evil 2 2. It was a nice time, but Resident Evil 4 almost certainly we'll be talking about it in a few more months' time or a year's time as being the best-selling game in the series, I expect. And
Again.
Yeah, again. Big applause to Capcom, I guess, for continuing to outdo themselves. Again, we talk about it all the time, and I don't need to harp on about it too much. But in a time in the games industry where studios are closing, lots of layoffs, lots of games that are just not hitting, not selling, and it's a weird time in the games industry, rife with confusion and worry for lots of major studios. Capcom, who have been around since near enough the beginning, are probably, hitting. They had certainly hit numbers they never hit before. This is probably the prime of Capcom at this point in terms of sales and review scores.
It's nice to see that for every, God, what was it called? Exoprimal? They do release a Resident Evil game or a Monster Hunter game because Wild is coming out and that game looks like a banger.
Yeah, I think we talked about last time with sales, didn't we? The only 2 games higher than Resident Evil on the Capcom sellers list are Monster Hunter games. So they're probably going to do that again in the next couple of years with the new Monster Hunter because I've never played one. I'm going to be picking it up. So yeah, good for Capcom, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, that'll do in terms of the news. It's still quite quiet, so that cues us up nicely for yet another edition of Comic Club presented by WildStorm. And now, reading the file regarding the mutant organism found in the facilities from Resident Evil 5, Jojo Spud 24/7, who you can follow on Twitter at Jojo Spud 24/7.
May 6. A fire broke out during the test for loading Ouroboros virus onto the missiles. This required a temporary Level 4 BL-4 quarantine for the immediate area. May 11. It's been 5 days since the area was put under quarantine. There have been reports of an animal undergoing a strange and rapid mutation. Eyewitness accounts indicate the creature possesses a very hard epidermis. No viral cysts related to Ouroboros have been reported, however. I speculate that we are dealing with something that has been influenced by the Ouroboros virus. A rare occurrence, to be sure. Perhaps tomorrow I will put together an investigation team to procure a sample specimen. May 12. I sent a lightly armed team to investigate the sightings of this strange creature. Unfortunately, another team had to be deployed to retrieve the corpses of the first team, which had been dismembered by something extremely sharp. There were also multiple stab wounds that appeared to be made by a giant spear. Trace amounts of a peculiar chemical substance were detected on the eyes of some of the corpses. What kind of mutant organism we are dealing with is still unknown at this time. According to the initial investigation, we could be dealing with a new type of BOW. Based on the creature's style of attack, I have codenamed it Reaper for the time being. Of course, more data on this creature is still required before a thorough analysis can be submitted.
This is the final WildStorm release. We've covered 3 of the 4 already up to this point. The sort of anthology collection was the first Resident Evil WildStorm release. We also had Fire and Ice, which was an ongoing story arc about STAR's Charlie team. And then they didn't develop, but they published the Chinese manhwa for Code Veronica as well. This is the final WildStorm release, as I say, the rather unhelpfully titled Resident Evil, often described as an RE5 tie-in, as the game obviously introduced the BSAA, and this series kind of is designed to spring off from that and build outwards from it. And I'm pretty sure early on it just says this is non-canon, but it's clearly based on that. We've got, the bioweapon black market thing going on. So, and also the release dates, of course, issue 1 and 2 of the series were released in May and June of 2009, just a couple of months after RE5. So kind of a promotion tool, followed later by issue 3, 6 months on from that, and then another half and a year later for issues 4 and 5, and then finally issue 6 came in February 2011, so it was over a year and a half between the series starting and finishing. 2009 to 2011, I don't think it's in print anymore, but you can still buy it on Kindle. I think individual issues or, as a bundle over on Amazon. So you can read this now. It's quite easy to get a hold of in that way. But maybe if you're lucky and you scour eBay and the like, you might be able to come across the graphic novel compilation of the 6 issues as well. Best of luck to you if you're attempting that. The story was written by WildStorm newcomer Ricardo Sanchez, who wrote who's written stuff for DC, Teen Titans, Dark Knight, and the art is primarily by Kevin Sharp. We're going to talk about the art first, as we do with Comic Club. With all of these things, like to judge a comic by its cover, or in this case, every single page without reading any of the words. Let's just talk about the way that the whole thing looks. Steve, what were your impressions on the sort of art style of, I hate the fact this is just called Resident Evil 2009 Wildstorm, this thing?
Honestly, I had a blast. Aesthetically, I've got really not too many issues. I especially love the approach to the BOW designs. There's one in issue 1, which is some kind of like Lovecraftian G-virus, like tentacled beastie. And it's just like, you can kind of gather the slime and goo sliding all up over it. And it's just very... It doesn't jump off the page, but it has that kind of evocative nature almost of 90s cartoons for me. Like the likes of X-Men and Spider-Man, those particular ones. That's what it feels like. The characters not so much, but the BOWs, they feel like they're from a cartoon you could see when you were younger.
Yeah, do you know
make any
what?
sense?
I hadn't necessarily thought that, but you're right. Especially sort of just looking through it now. Some of the character designs very much just like, oh yeah, that's just straight up an X-Men looking character, funnily enough to me. But yeah, no, the backgrounds I think for me are a bit more hit and miss. But otherwise, I would say this is quite largely consistent. This is definitely, I'd say it's one of the better ones. If better in terms of quality. I will still love the Code Veronica one for how absolutely bat poo insane it is, as we all just had a great time talking about how stupid that comic book is. But in terms of consistency, this is the strongest. So when the quality drops off for like one panel, it's very jarring. Like every few sort of 4 or 5, 6 pages, maybe there's a panel where somebody just doesn't look like what they're supposed to. So that's really odd. But otherwise, I thought it was pretty consistent. Bergs, how do you feel about the way that this looks?
Fine. This is, to me, a big fan of comic books from the time. This looks very, Steve pointed out, and I can't not see it now, but it does look like everybody does look like a character from the X-Men. Everybody's like jacked with their shoulders like farther out than their hips, looking like Henry Cavill,
yeah,
instead of The Witcher. And I think it was a bit grounding in terms of reading the experience, because the writing certainly wasn't very great. So like the artistic style kept me going through it. I appreciated, we'll get into story stuff, but like I appreciate a lot of like how stuff was framed and put together. Some of the BOW stuff that weren't like, I think the most interesting BOWs were in the first episode, the first issue, or the first 2. With the again, we'll get into story stuff, but like the one that Steve mentioned, the hive mind G virus thing was pretty cool. Other than that, like everything else that we saw was, except for one exception later in the run, everything else was kind of like stock standard zombie fodder.
It was awful to say, but I 100% agree already.
Yeah.
It was unique in the beginning, and then they just went back to what they knew, and that was kind of a bummer. But
it's really interesting to me that you say that, because I didn't necessarily feel that from issue 1 so much. Like, absolutely agree that this sort of tentacled wibbly wobbly space plant monster was pretty cool and unique. But also in issue 1, they're fighting like G-virus soldiers who are just, and we have a section for BOWs that we'll get into, but in terms of the art style, these guys are just like big red men. Like that's pretty much just big red dudes, which is
big
kind of
brain man.
Big brain man. Like some of them are kind of cool in terms of the details, like obviously being that the G-virus creatures, they have big eyes and stuff, and like there's like a panel right before the end of issue 1 where there's a monster with a big eye on his shoulder, traditional G-virus style, and also one of the eyes on his face is like huge and enlarged. I thought that was pretty striking. But the rest of them are just kind of like angry red dude. That's basically what it is. It's like, it's a shame.
I believe the law says they are crimson lads.
Crimson lads. They didn't really put a ton of like gnarly detail into them, but I think it ebbs and flows for me in terms of the detail. Some of it's really good.
Yeah.
Some of it's kind of like, well, really, it's as much as you bother to do. I don't want to compare it too much to the Code Veronica one because it's not overly
Different.
fair, especially because, like, it wasn't even made by the same team. WildStorm just put it out. But one of the things I think we praised the Code Veronica one for, if I remember rightly, was just like the amount of incredible sort of big splash pages that it had that were just like one giant panel that took across like 2 pages, maybe a couple of things around the sort of border of it. It doesn't really have a lot of that. There are a few luscious panels, but there's nothing like, turn the page, big striking like moment, which is a shame because that was something that I remember us all sort of banging on about being really nice about the last one. It would have been nice to have more variation in the format, I guess is what I'm getting to with that. But
Yeah.
to bring the positive back up, the cover art for this series is largely pretty damn incredible. I could use any of these as like the thumbnail for the podcast, and they'd all bang. Like they're all really, really good. I don't know if I saw it on a shelf, if I'd buy it as a total unknown because the sort of military bravado thing isn't for me. But if I saw this and I saw the words Resident Evil, and if I was a casual fan and I knew the words Resident Evil, this would get my attention because the art on the cover is really good all across the board.
Yeah, but then you open it and that like. so one last thing I'll say with the art is it all looks consistent to Resident Evil as well. Like
Yeah, that's true.
it doesn't like the outfit that the main characters are wearing all look like BS. Like they all look like outfits that we've seen. The zombies for what they all are look like ones we've seen. They show lickers, they show hunters. Like it's all there, and it all looks like it's supposed to, which I guess is a bonus.
This is true. That's very, very true. We have had Resident Evil things, but that's not necessarily the case. And it was definitely something that I pointed out in my notes as well, that it's kind of nice to see Chris's BSAA uniform being worn by someone else and seeing that it actually maybe is a uniform and not just like he's the main character, so he gets to wear something different. Like it's cool to see people in that outfit. So, yeah, always strong. Let's rock into the story then, because we do have 6 issues to cover, which might be more than we've done on a comic club, but either way we'll try and keep it a little bit pacey. So issue 1, just a little bit of a story synopsis. The BSAA deploy young but super talented why did I put the word Uber there? Super talented Uber. Okay. She's really good at driving
It's just
taxis.
gig economy side. You've got to fight BOWs on a budget.
The BSA deploy young, super talented soldier, Mina Gear, to the Joint Nations Space Station, where a researcher believed illegal bioweapons work is taking place. When she arrives, in standard Resident Evil fashion, everyone's already dead, and she's got to figure out why, whilst battling BOWs. Meanwhile, on the ground, a BSAA team touched down in Grezbekistan to find a satellite led by Holiday Sugarman, which is a hilarious name, whose squad, of course, again in true Resident Evil fashion, is wiped out by monsters. Bergs, what do you think of the story of issue 1?
I like space.
Do you know, actually, sorry to cut in, but I just want to point out, in the intro I was like, in space, and last podcast I was like, we're doing the one with Resident Evil Space. We've been building up to this. When the space bit happened, I was like, this is actually pretty cool, Did you think the space bit was cool?
I did, absolutely. Like, there's a funny moment in there where she's like, oh, great, like she sees a licker and she's not panicking. So, like, in terms of framing who the character is, it shows Mina as very competent because she, like, basically handles a licker immediately. Because she has experience with a knife.
That's how you do it in Resident Evil 2 Remake.
Well, yeah, but not everybody's good at Resident Evil 2 Remake. Some of us are bad at video games.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm teasing. But yeah, no, I think the space stuff is really cool. Of the 2 main characters, I like Mina better than Sugarman. And I think part of that is because she's characterized in the beginning as so freaking competent, and like, I don't know, they give her, I guess it's part of later in the series. It's only 6 issues long, which isn't that much for a comic book. So it all kind of at this point bleeds together in my brain, but like they give her a lot of flack, and she's like competent the whole time. But it is what it is. In terms of other space stuff, I have a hard time with like, I don't know. I don't get the why initially she was like in space, but I guess you have to have your Resident Evil space episode. Just need the Resident Evil beach episode. I will
that
say,
exists. Don't worry.
It's funny. It's in Revelations, isn't it?
Oh no! Well, there's a Revelations 2 tie-in sort of comic. I think. Is that Resident Evil 6? Resident Evil Revelation. There's a whole thing. We'll get there one day. It's a thing.
And the wibbly penis monster that she sees in space is pretty cool. Tell me that it doesn't look like that.
Kinda. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on Mina to a certain extent. I think it's very funny that they early on they're sort of like, she's really young, but don't worry, she's really competent because she was in the space program and she was a Marine before she joined the BSAA. So when I was reading that, all that told me is that she can't hold down a job. Like, she's been a Marine and she was in the space program. Now she's in the BSAA and she's only 22. Like, okay, so she gets she gets through the training camps for all of them and just leaves immediately, does she? Like, that's not great, is it? But I was kind of with you because like the first page is all exposition for why this is happening, and even still, because it's kind of dull, they just like dump all the exposition in you as the form of like a phone call.
Yeah.
It didn't go in. Also, mostly I was distracted by the first page because like every few words are emphasized. Like how in comics they'll bold and italic certain words. There was so much of it in the first couple of pages. It feels like everyone's talking like Christopher Walken. It's so weird. If you read it back, trust me, it's incredible. I was so distracting. Testing the beacon now. Are you receiving, Wayfarer? Like, why did you need to emphasize the word receiving? Signal is clear and strong, Agent Gear. Like, what's the point? I was so distracted.
We're depending on a Greenfield agent who works under her to safeguard our interests in space.
Yeah, why? Why you didn't need to do that? Steve, what did you make of issue 1?
I went through an emotional little ride. I've got to be honest. Like, originally, get the they've done this, and this. I'm thinking this sounds like the most Mary Sue.
Yes.
OC kind of. I think but also we got to remember this is the same franchise that had child prodigy chemists signs up for paramilitary police force. So I had to hand wave it a little bit.
True.
But it's this person trained for space and has a magic gun and all these other bits. But that being said, the opening panel, the opening page had the beautiful audacity to have a big sweeping shot of a space shuttle, I believe the Wayfarer shuttle, going across the page, and they use the Star Trek: The Next Generation font as the first thing you see. Therefore, hands are waved. It's fantastic. Flawless.
They do. I didn't even see that.
Well, honestly, in a James Bond film where normally, traditionally, apologies if people haven't seen a James Bond film, spoilers for 90 of them at least, they'll have him do something really cool and adventurous that's not really tied to the main plot first. That's what this starts to feel like the further it goes on. This is James Bond or Jane Bond, I suppose, coming in and wrecking house to establish just how cool she is, which is fine. She carries like a Skyrim level sword as a combat knife. It's amazing. But the main takeaway from me was she's very capable, but always being questioned. She's trying to try and relay information. Like, are you sure? Good. Keep this agent free and all. It's like, and then she sees a liquor and bosses it.
Tell you what, though, one positive about, and we'll talk about the sort of second half of this issue in a minute, but the first, the story that's set in space, I was already immediately happy. The last comic club episode we did was talking about the painfully boring Infinite Darkness tie-in, where I think the first issue has like a single panel of a zombie right at the end, maybe a couple panels. Like, it was just a bunch of dudes talking and a random explosion, but no monsters. So it was like, remember we were like, it doesn't feel like Resident Evil at all. This at least doesn't waste much time. It just gets right into it. It goes, there's a liquor in space. This is what you came for. You read the back of the issue. Here it is. It's a Resident Evil monster, in space. So again, as much as we laughed about they did a Resident Evil in space, I was like, well, at least they delivered on the promise, like right out the gate in the first couple of pages. And there's, a few more monsters throughout this issue. So The context being that we've just read, sort of 6 or 7 months ago, the really bad, boring Infinite Darkness series, which I never want to have to think about again. This was refreshing in that sense.
I have a question for you, Si. This is more leading into the second part of the comic, which is on the ground. Sorry, listeners, this is boring Earthborn stuff. Did you at all hear the guiding mission theme, or was that just me?
I think that was just you.
The dark blue set night. I just heard the burr, 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 burr. The entire do a breathing thing. I want to say it's a helicopter, something like that. It's just basically, Holiday Sugarman. What a name! Obligatory Ace Rimmer. What a guy! It's just, just dropping random quotes from random things. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, let's talk about the second half of it, which, yes, the story of this I have summarized in my notes as military men touch down and die, and then the lead guy says some comic book one-liners. That is basically the entire plot of the second half of this book.
That's Sugarman's entire plot arc.
I was going to say, it continues throughout the whole thing, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, I thought it was fine. It was one of those things where at the end of issue 1, it left me wondering, as you're supposed to, these two things are going to connect at some point, and I wonder how that's going to work. So, I guess it worked on me in that sense, but the space story is the better half. The second bit is just, big, buff, beardy man quotes things and shoots generic red monsters to me. I was like, oh, okay. We're doing we're back to doing old. This feels like Fire and Ice again, kind of. Bergs, how did you feel about Holiday Sugarman's debut?
So I'll say this about Holiday Sugarman is he very much looks like Cyclops from the X-Men cartoon.
I think Choji in the chat said he looks like Cable, which is a really good shout.
Yeah, it is. This good. He's got the gruff exterior. There's a couple of things I want to point out in this too. Is in Uzbekistan we see a situation where a zombie has their face open like a predator. Which I don't think we've ever seen. Have we ever seen faces open like that?
I'm trying to find the panel now.
It's literally right after you see that.
I guess it's kind of Plaga-esque, isn't it? Which is weird because these are things that are meant to be G-virus monsters, but okay.
I imagine that he saw the concept art and kind of went ham with it. It's okay, you need these goofy looking monsters. He probably saw a couple art of Birkin, and was like, just give everything more eyes.
Yeah,
and then he did. He there's a fellow's got an eye in his chest. So they really took the notes of what, we really need more eyes. And ran with it. But also, not only is it red, crimson lads, as Steve pointed out, but it's also in a red space. So it's red on red on red. But the interesting thing is that he's so blue. So at the very least, Steve McSugarman one-liner. That's his name now because I don't remember it. At the very least, sticks out a lot. So he does follow the basic tenets of main character sticking out on the page.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I imagine why everything is red. I don't think that his arc gets interesting until the second half of it. They kind of focused on the girl this time, which, at the very least, for a comic book release in this era, absolutely awesome that they did the woman first.
That's very true, actually. Very true.
Yeah.
That is perfect timing because someone just knocked on my door, so it should be my Amazon. So I'm going to come back and then we'll do issue 2. Sorry.
Now that Sai's gone, we should all talk about how awesome Sai is.
What did Sai buy? I think it's Amazon, so that could be literally anything.
I'm guessing makeup. It's gonna be my guess. It's gonna be my shadow palette.
Clothes, actually.
Damn close. Katie, you got it. Yeah.
Use clothes.
So
for your feet.
Yeah, kind of. So that's a half a point. Right. Okay. All right. Speaking of which, then let's move into issue 2, which I'm going to give a synopsis each time, but they are going to be very brief. I think it's really all you need. So to conclude the space story, What's her first name? Mina. Mina gear triggers the station to explode to cleanse the BOWs on board. Meanwhile, Sugarman fights off the seemingly G infectants and completes his objective, cleansing the monsters with a flamethrower afterwards. That's pretty much all you need. This is kind of the action episode, I guess. Although the first one was as well, but what do you know? Bergs, what did you make of the second issue?
Second issue was cool. Like, it did wrap up. It was like a cool way to wrap up the intro. It felt like the other half of a 2-part episode of the Next Generation. I want to, if we're talking about this as well, I want to point out that the zombies that are in the first book, on the cover of the first book, are the same ones on the cover of the second one, but they are not shadowed.
Oh yeah,
I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't notice it earlier, but I want to see if they're on the. Okay, so they changed that format after the first two. So, like, again, unifying moment of like bringing these two pieces together.
That's very true. And the heroes together on the front now.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that I guess she finishes her space mission and immediately her top gets lower. But you got to attract the people, and again, more fighting with the wibbly tentacle monster. Cool. It was the end of the other half, the back end of the action episode. Like, it's where all the fun stuff happens. This is, Locutus of Borg comes on screen, and then they have to solve that problem. That's this is the other half of that. I think the art's coolest in this one. I think it's coolest in this one. A lot of fun use of color too. Which I mentioned kind of in the first one as one of the saving graces to the other side of the plot. Again, I think it's really cool that they kind of tie them together with a, you see the explosion from space on the ground, and then we go back into it with, the gentleman who's on the ground and finishing his problems. I will note this as something that I think is a weird moment for the series as a whole, but this is one of the first instances where, they're like, God, we ran out of ammo. Good thing there's ammo right there. Like, in no situation do I ever feel like in this, especially in this one, because again, it's supposed to be an action game, an action story. So yeah, why would your action hero run out of ammo?
It doesn't serve a purpose, does it? If we just picked up more ammo immediately, it's like a waste of $2.
But somebody's notes are like ammo scarcity. Like, so when you get your artist brief, you're like, ammo scarcity is a thing in the game series. Like, okay, so we have to have them run out of ammo.
True.
But no, again, more of the same stuff. Like, this was fun as a comic book. Like, as a fan of the medium of comic books, fun issue, great art, good use of color. If you just look at the bubbles without reading the writing, it's a fun story.
On the ammo thing, I thought it was really funny that he finds this box of ammo in like a cave or whatever he's in, and he's like, "Oh, it's not much ammo in it," and then he depletes the ammo in like a single frame. So yes, I guess ammo scarcity is certainly a thing. It was like,
but
really funny
there's
for him
also
to point
just
it
a
out.
Molotov cocktail in the box.
Yeah, it's just I looked at it, I was like, is that a bottle? Yes, no, there's just what you need for a Molotov in there. And the second part of the story, just like to conclude his little firefight there, it ends with him firing a rocket at the monster's head that he calls Big Brother, and it doesn't leave a scratch. So he thinks, what, I'll run at it with a knife. Well, do you think that'll work? And yes, apparently it does. So I just really funny that it completely no-sells a rocket and then gets stabbed in the head afterwards. But okay, sure, why not?
Lastly, Resident Evil monsters never need to adhere to physics, ever.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, extra joints given to me. Like, the monsters look great here. A lot of the gore, like I like the gore in the whole series. Like, stuff looks bloody and gross, and I want it, like, it's what I want it to look like. Like, the couple panels where he kills Big Brother are really great. For that kind of like slaughter bait. Which sometimes you want, and in Resident Evil, I don't hate it. Like, body horror is part of what this I enjoy about the series. I like this one. Thumbs up.
Yeah, this is one of the better ones for me as well. I think it's really interesting what we talked about, like the sort of color theory of issue 1 and all the reds with him being blue. And it's a continuing firefight where we kind of lose the red background. Which actually I don't mind at all. Like, there's a lot more detail in this version, and it allows for everything just to look a bit bolder. Like, the monsters are able to stand out more, and you're able to pick out a bit more detail, the ones in the back and stuff like that. So yeah, overall, his sort of Holiday Sugarman's part of the story much more entertaining than the first one, with him concluding with him burning everything with a flamethrower, sort of the Thing style. As for the space stuff, again, I found stuff to like about that. I actually kind of like that for once we don't have the company and the protagonist arguing amongst each other. She's just like, this thing sucks and we need to blow up the whole station immediately. And they're like, yeah, I guess you're right. Okay. And that's it. Like, it's not, well, we must protect the asset, and all this and that. No, they just go, right, we need to blow up the space station. If I go with it, that would suck, but I'm going to try not to. And they just get on with it. Like, that's actually nice to see the BSAA being a well-run organization that knows what it's doing.
I mean, she even asks for authorization, doesn't she? And like, yeah, got it, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly it. She asks them, they're like, is that what you need? Okay, let's just do it then. Instead of, the RE5, guess we're expendable thing that every action movie or whatever needs to do. So that was actually kind of nice and kind of refreshing, which juxtaposes completely with, I don't know what she's saying about, hey, if they're growing mutants in space, that means that gravity might make them immune to hard vacuum. I'm like, does it? Is that what that means? I don't know. I'm not a space woman. I don't know, but I don't know if that's what that means.
Come on, say we all said dumb shit when we were 22.
Maybe so. She's making a hell of an assumption, I guess. But yeah, the pacing here I thought was really good, and what you were saying about sort of concluding the first half, it's really kind of refreshing that we have an Act 1 in these two issues, essentially. They tie up both these little stories, and we know we've got 4 more issues to go. I was like, at this point, I'm actually, I'm kind of hopeful. This felt good as a little 2-issue thing. Interested to see where it goes from here. Steve, how did you feel about issue 2?
Pretty much the same page. The thing that grabbed me the most was the fact, oh my God, it's Chaos. It's not Chaos. It never was. It's already more compelling as it's slithering around a space station. It's like, everybody or infected everybody. And it just looks like a watery thing, which is great in contrast to, big bloke fights. What's it called? Duke Nukem 3D. Octobrain. There's a regular enemy in that called Octobrain. Google it. You know what I mean exactly. That if it had legs. If you put these two things on paper, right? One lady fights a space station infested with monsters, and bloke fights stuff in a cave. I can't help but feel one's getting a rougher deal than the other, which is true. Because Mina's stuff is infinitely more compelling for me. Yes, it's funny seeing him go, I'm out of ammo, finds AK-47, finds rocket launcher, uses knife. But there are some ideas in the space stuff. I can't believe I'm freaking saying this because Resident Evil Space makes me cringe. But there are some ideas that actually I'm kind of interested in, because the idea of not being constrained by gravity could affect evolution in strange ways. It's led into some of the science and science fiction before. The first thing that comes to mind is your Gundam stuff. But the idea that G evolves differently in space can become infinitely more dangerous. I know immune to hard vacuum is a stretch, but the idea that it could evolve differently and be a more pertinent threat, I like kind of cool. And I'm pretty sure there's something somewhere about there's a satellite filled with G virus that's been left to just go rampant and cook. Yeah, that's going to be launched at Earth. There's a world-ending threat that's just casually like, yeah, we'll deal with that. It's just off camera, because all these 2 plot threads just get brushed aside for the main plot for the rest of the issues, guys. Sorry, spoilers. And Mina's already stopped a world-ending threat, fought red Nosferatu-looking zombie fellas and discount Chaos versus, Holiday Sugarman's many guns versus an Octobrain. I do like the idea of a hive mind, doing a group kill, and the whole knife in the head, putting it down, does look pretty swish, even compared to the likes of Super Saiyan Chris Redfield in the manhwa. Right, but generally speaking, Mina got the better deal. She's got the better agent.
Big time. Which again, like I say, I thought the space stuff was just going to be really dumb and stupid, and maybe it is because it juxtaposes with kind of generic action stuff, fine action stuff, as you say, with a bit of stylishness to it. But it stood out as the more unique of the two and didn't go completely insane. I did come out of issue 2 being like, wow, okay, that was actually pretty cool. I don't think I want a game that's set on space, but as a dumb, non-canon comic book, sure, I had fun with that part. Let's roll into issue 3. Oh, sorry, Steve.
No. I was going to say that's fair. I just wish we had a bit more context for the cave. It was just some bloke show up and fight some monsters.
And it was really hard to, from issue 2 ends, it should be pointed out, with them finding whatever they need to find. It's like a bit of a satellite or whatever, and that gives them the name Giselle Industries, I think. And that kind of informs the rest of the story. But again, some of the plot details in this were just kind of, I don't know if it was bouncing off me for one reason or another, or I wasn't paying attention, or there just wasn't enough to grab into in terms of the actual intrigue. But yeah, I had to look back on that and be like, okay, so that's how those things connected. That's how we are where we're at with issue 3. Which, the synopsis for this one, Mina Gear investigates a small town in Uberlandia and is ambushed by BOWs. There's a lot of made-up places in this comic book. She and Sugarman are forcefully teamed up to investigate Giselle Industries, whose name was on the satellite, as I say. So first, again, another issue that starts with Mina having a little bit of her own adventure, which is, Bergs, you're absolutely right, is really cool. And this is the point where the characters converge and are, forced to work together for the good of, well, BSAA and everyone else, indeed. My first note on this one is the huge pop that I had when shipping containers full of monsters are just dumped on a tiny town somewhere. A tiny town with no one in it except for Mina and a girl who is not Manuel Hidalgo from Darkside Chronicles. I was like, this is insane. We have literal shipping containers full of monsters now in Resident Evil, apparently. Where do they come from? Why are they on a helicopter? What is going on here? Do we get answers to any of this? Not particularly. Steve, what did you make of issue 3?
Oh my God, it's Resident Evil Extinction. that was one of my first notes was, oh my God, the raining zombies. It literally is just cargo containers dumping them out, folks. It's it's pretty wild. Other than that, Mina's wearing her own version of Chris Redfield's outfit, but apparently it doesn't button up all the way because her movies are always on display. The male gaze is in full effect now for Mina, bless her. Generally speaking, though, I thought it was all right because, they are going through not Javier Hidalgo's his place. It's just generic, scary place, but it really does feel Darkside Chronicles coded.
Yeah, it does.
And there's even this beautiful church where they find a small girl, and it you can almost feel if this was a film, the cinematographer hovering on the creepy rat that was underneath the girl, to say, "Oh, this is going to be a problem in a few pages." It was. Yeah, I genuinely had fun with this bit, at least the initial bit, anyway, where they go into the town, and I can't remember a sidekick's name. Just bloke with crew cut.
I think it's Cruz.
I think it is Cruz. My brain was going to say Clive, but I think Clive Cruz, that's his name.
Bloke with crew cut, that's his name. I'm sorry. Bloke with crew cut. They meet what I want to say is Alice from Alice Madness Returns. If they were actually a 4-year-old, 5-year-old girl. This is I want to say the first time Resident Evil's gone for child zombie, and it's been scary because I know Remake 2 kind of implied it. Yeah. Or at least Kendo's daughter wasn't doing so well.
Oh yeah,
but you don't really see her go, murderous.
Yeah.
Oh no! What am I about? Resident Evil 2, the second film. There's the whole bit where the journalist gets devoured. Ignore me.
Oh yes, that's true. Well, that doesn't count.
But the actual vibes of it, creepy. Generally speaking, creepy, and as ridiculous as it sounds, a zombie airstrike. It's a spectacle.
Yeah,
it's a spectacle. I don't see what sense it makes, but it's a spectacle. Berks, go on.
So, this is full-blown capitalism dystopia. This is cyberpunk in the year 2018. Speaking in 2008, we all know 2018 wasn't this, but I think when you're seeing capitalistic decline, this is kind of what it looks like, where companies can just dump experiments on a village and get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of that, it is kind of spooky. I'll admit, Steve, when I was reading this the other day, I completely missed the rat. I'm oh, I'm not surprised to see that because she's a little girl they found in a village, but I didn't catch that foreshadowing when I was going through it. Which may very much be as part of the medium because I scroll through these.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not lingering on the page. When you're reading a comic book, you have it in your hand. And you,
that's true.
So that's on me. No, I like Mina's B plot. Mina's boobs are out on parade the entire time.
Yeah.
But she still is Mina. She still is the same character in terms of. Yeah, the things she's saying and doing, it's like, yeah, she's being a badass, but like, couldn't you just literally like pull that up just a bit? No, 2008 artist, we can't. The monsters look cool in this issue. I like it a lot. Like, there's like a very like looking at the panel where it's like they're driving the Jeep, the Peugeot, and you see more helicopters in the background, and then there's just bodies and they're driving around it. Like that panel is really, really cool.
Yeah.
More subdued. Again, cool use of color. I thought it was interesting they gave us like new people. I don't know why, because like none of these people matter or come back.
That's true.
Yeah. Again, child zombie, and that last few panels in that book too are just gorgeous. You could see they really like saved their energy for the last 3 to 5 pages of that book. In terms of the that happens in it. I liked it. No. And then the profile you get at the end is cool. Like
the use of color, as we've talked about, it's really, really good. But also in those particular pages that you're talking about, the way they use color to sort of imply fire and the light bouncing off from the fire is really impressive.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to do we actually know why they are there? Is it they're searching for disappearances, right? That's the general gist of the plot. That the reason why we have 2 BSA agents in this village is just like local villages are being cleared out of people.
Yeah, they basically say there was loads of people here last time I was here. So I guess they're investigating for why there's so many missing people.
Yeah, and do they not at any point go, that's where the missing people are as they're being dropped on from overhead? It just seems a little bit like the plot is being threaded along by the action at this point. Not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I understand the idea of the nature of this comic, really, but at this point, we should have had a plot start to develop, is all I'm saying.
Yes, this is a weird one because it's definitely a tale of 2 completely different things going on here. The first part is the bit we've talked about the most, but it's only half the issue. The other half of the issue is just, like a bunch of squaddies talking to each other, and I just complimented the story for not having Mina like clashing with the superiors. Of course, Holiday Sugarman and Mina won't get along because she's a young girl, and what does she know about anything? And it turns out he's a bit of a boring misogynist type, and so they don't get along inevitably, which is kind of boring. But the first part is pretty cool. But you talk about the questions about the plot. There's a line here. Did everyone else do the same thing? Where there's a line, I think it's literally the panel where they're in the Jeep and they're getting away from all the zombies. And one of the characters, Cruz, says to Mina or the other around, what were those things on their heads? And I don't know. Did everyone else scroll up to see what they had on their heads and not find anything? Because all these zombies, am I just not seeing it?
Yeah, no,
you're right.
There's nothing on their heads. What are they talking about?
They show it. They show that later.
Yeah, it doesn't. You don't see it until like the last issue, I think. Not clearly, anyway. I didn't notice, or at least remember to look. But yeah, it's really funny that they go, "What are those on their heads?" Oh, I don't know. Hair? Like, what are you talking about? It's kind of a bit of an oversight, unfortunately.
They all have grey hair. Maybe they're just being ageist.
Maybe so. Maybe so. But yeah, the action was fine. The badonkas were honkering, and the creepy child zombie it was kind of cool, I guess, and a cool moment for Mina to show yet again that she's the capable.
Can we get the breakdown of the world's coolest man, or at least someone's idea of the world's coolest man as well? There's like the biopic page is this one, right?
Yes, this is Holiday Sugarman's sort of profile thing at the end, where he's like goes to a war-torn country to teach, and then has, wife and child, and then they die in Raccoon City because, of course, that's the only place anyone ever died in 1998. And so he joins the BSAA.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. It's the only people.
Tell me I'm wrong. Yeah, I mean, it's a fine issue. It's a bit of a step down, but I felt like, hey, we're going towards a plot now. But it didn't feel like the plot had actually begun, and some of the character beats were a little bit disappointing. So mixed feelings about issue 3 for me, even though actually I do want to say, +1 to what you were saying about the zombies. Some of the zombie artwork where like there's a particular panel where Mina has put a knife through one's head and the eye pops out. It's very funny, like comically graphic kind of stuff. Big fan of that in goofy action comic books. And now, reading the file Note Found in Room 303 from Resident Evil Revelations, I Rock a Old Soul. You can follow on Twitter at I Rock a Old Soul.
What the hell is going on? Monsters are crawling all over the ship. They're tearing it to pieces. I've never seen monsters like this. Their movements are stiff, stilted, but it's all over if they get a hold of you. Those piece of crap monsters ate my friend Hassan. I used my gun to frighten them off, giving me time to get the hell out of there. The bullet went straight through its arm, thank goodness. These monsters have bones like an old woman. There's nowhere left to run now. Damn monster twisted my leg good. Hell, I've run out of ammo too. God only knows how I'm going to survive this.
Cool. Issue 4 then. We're halfway there. Mina Gear and Holiday Sugarman explore the mansion of Giselle, Fritz Giselle, the CEO of the company, believed to be involved in some way because their name was on the satellite. And there they meet the stereotypical German madman character and, of course, are ambushed. The madman, presumably Fritz's nephew, Newman. Bergs, what did you think of issue 4?
This is the one where I mentioned earlier. This is nice that they gave us. Yeah, we finally get Nazi zombies out of Resident Evil.
Yeah, I didn't know what you meant at first, but then I was like, do you know what? You're not wrong, actually.
Yeah, there's in issue 5. There's even a person who's like wearing a very German style uniform, like. But no, it's nice to see that again. In this instance, the BSA is looking like competent, if like overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like they come in, they have their weapons, they have their stuff, but like at one point they just run out of ammo.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the fight with the tyrant. That's cool and interesting. It's fascinating use of color in this issue as well. Again, now that I'm looking at it again, very green, but very bright, like dark lines. This is like peak comic book to me. And I dig it. I dig it quite a bit, actually. I didn't hate it. It's funny. I meme about it. I'm a big fan of the series as a whole, obviously, even though I hate it, and the medium. And I've definitely read worse adaptations.
Yeah.
But the story here is cool. Like it's more badass people doing badass things, and they give us other people to watch do it for a while.
I think one of the reasons I didn't even think about the fact that there is somewhat German military coded and Nazi coded sort of uniformed zombies from here, more so I think onwards into the next issue, but was that this issue gave us back some BOWs that we hadn't seen in so long, and I can't believe how excited I was to see actual Plant 43, like original Resident Evil 2 style Ivy in here, which I was like, oh, I didn't realise I actually missed you. So that was really nice. Again, it's an easy nostalgia pop, but it worked on me. And the Eliminators as well. I was like, wow, okay, this is really cool. You've got me in, because I was like, oh, recognisable BOWs that aren't just, zombie liquor tyrant.
I want look how gorgeous that panel is too, where they show you that plant. Like, just
the colours
off the page. Yeah,
like, the colours on Ivy really, really lovely. Like as you said, I put the same thing in my notes, that the colours in this issue are really, really great. And there's some really, again, some fun panels of monster kills. And human kills. Someone getting their head fully nommed on by an eliminator was really funny.
Yeah.
Big fan of that. I did think some of the action was a little bit hard to follow at this point. There's sort of no placement for objects and stuff that are on screen. There's a lot of panels that are filled with fire, with like one big central monster, and then sometimes some flaming zombie skulls in the back. Which doesn't really give you too much of a sense of scale or a place for everyone. So I had to look over some bits a few times to really get what was going on, which is a shame, because otherwise I thought it was solid. The story of the new man, get it, something twist is coming, bad guy, German bad guy. It's like, okay, Resident Evil's done all the painfully obvious stereotypes, so we have to have a German CEO guy with his discotheque. Steve, what did you make of issue 4?
I feel like we've had Nazis alluded to in the WildStorm comics before, right?
It rings a bell.
Yeah, I feel like that was like the last like parts of Fire and Ice, the Nazi castle and stuff, and the fact that I was reading it as Giesel, like Diesel, Nurman Giesel, very much like the writing was on the wall. The minute one, you see this man that is obviously a heel twist villain. I am the evil man, yeah. But he also has a cavalcade of classic monsters, like we said. I don't know if you noticed in the panel when he springs his trap, it's again a helicopter dropping eliminators and zombies into a greenhouse that's already got ivies disemboweling like 90% of the BSAA there. So they were on the back foot. But I think the takeaway for me is Helgas Tyrant, really cool flamethrower girl who then gets curb stomped, sadly, and then some other red shirts that seem to stand around a bit. There's some more generic background characters who I think are in danger of getting names in this issue. They get cornered, and then Holiday Sugarman is also now master bomb maker and conveniently is in a room to make bombs. Okay, that's great. But the main takeaway for me is they bring a tyrant that looks an awful lot like he's straight out of Wolfenstein. He's got like a creepy ass like super soldaten helmet, which is very keeping with the whole Nazi code stuff going on. Yep. And then we even get a cool homage to Resident Evil Village, 10 years ahead of time, where, Mina gets a grenade, puts it on a knife, and stabs a tyrant with it. There you go. But honestly, this one, while it did feel like the second they're in the greenhouse, it's nothing but apocalyptic mayhem action, I kind of dig it. I like the idea of groups of soldiers fighting monsters together. The only issue is, the only real thing we know as right now is newer man Giselle is in it for, the chaos, because I have no idea what his plan is.
Indeed.
Like he's just causing mayhem and madness and laughing about it in his disco bar. Which I suppose is a step to the side of, and the world will burn in an inferno of hate. So I'll give him that.
He said the line.
None of that this time. He's just in it for the love of being a git.
Can't really argue with that, I suppose. We also got Mina's backstory, similar to Sugar's, where she hacks the secure servers, is all it says, and manages to put her school principal on the FBI's most wanted list for an April Fool's prank. And then the government say you need to work for us or go to prison. Which is
Leon Kennedy job.
Yeah, quite an intense way about things, I guess. But yeah, that is Resident Evil US government to a T, I suppose. And give a bit of, I guess, a little more info on the background that we'd already been told about, as well as her age, to round things off. Yeah, a fine issue where at this point, if you don't realise that this is just a dumb action flick, then you're probably going to be disappointed by the lack of story and the fact that Newman, the German name Newman, means new man. There's a twist coming, guys. Oh my god, can't believe it. It's fine. Like, at this point, I actually took a break, I guess, around this point to refresh my brain, because I was like, am I paying any attention to this, or am I just going, that's a pretty panel of things dying? And I came back and I'm pretty sure I just went, no, that's what this comic is. It's a bunch of pretty panels of things dying and blowing up and kind of cool monster designs. I guess that's probably what you want, right? So that brings us into issue 5, where Mina and Sugarman chase after Giselle, deducing, as I've implied, that he is a de-aged Fritz. He's a new man. He's actually used the G virus or whatever or something to de-age himself, doing what Spencer tried to do all this time, but in comic book form. So that's handy, I guess. Steve, what did you think of issue number 5?
He looks like Dr. Kirk.
He does.
Dino Crisis. I've just realised looking at it again.
Yeah. He does.
Dr. Kirk Dino Crisis. Honestly, this one felt like the most like, let's try and establish some side characters and make them relevant.
Yeah.
And then proceed to almost kill them all. Which is a shame, because I think the only one that survives is a bandana-like lady who's, I want to say, is called Lupo, which is very awkward because there's already a Lupo in the Resident Evil franchise.
Probably wasn't at this point.
2010, 2009? Yeah, no, you're right. Other than that, it's just, oh yeah, he's chipping people and he's got an evil plan in it. I think they call back up or something and they just get flubbed and go like, nah, good luck, you're on your own.
Yeah, pretty much.
But generally speaking, I think the main takeaway from this issue is that they're getting hammered and they're being surrounded. And let's say there's a pyramid trap or something, that's where his secret lab is. Still no idea on his plan. He's just evil German scientist.
Throwing waves of BOWs.
Yeah. Is it this issue or next issue where we see the actual brain implanting stuff?
I think it's next issue, as far as I'm aware. This is the issue where we get hunters right from the off. My first note was on that thing about the backup. They request a chopper, and the response they get back is, sorry, we can't do that. We have other stuff on, but we can airdrop you some supplies. I was like, how are you going to do that? Are you going to use a chopper? Maybe you do have a chopper then. So that's kind of dumb, but there you go. This is a weird issue because the action dies off a little bit, but the plot doesn't necessarily pick up. There's a lot of them sort of waffling to, I guess, new characters and each other. And they like get a big van thing and they fill it full of weapons or whatever. But we don't really know what they're doing because we don't really know what the bad guy's doing. This issue is kind of a blah one, but there is a couple of really good panels. And I said earlier about we don't have many cool big splash image panels. There is at least a few really nice ones in this issue for what it's worth. Bergs, what did you make of issue number 5 as we rocket towards the end of the series?
Rocket towards the end of this series is accurate. Unremarkable. Like in terms of issues of this series, it was the exposition arc.
Yeah.
I thought it was one of the least visually interesting of them because it's definitely more scary, especially after the last one.
Yeah.
Like the sketchy, darker, muddier style of this one, where everything is like shades of green, or brown.
It was the style at the time, sort of.
Yeah. Hunters look great. Cerberuses look great. If they look like they're supposed to. I'll admit I wish we'd have seen them on the other art style because I think they'd be more interesting. The only hint that you get of what's going on is that they do find the villagers they were looking for.
That's true.
Having been infected by the virus. But yeah, this was just like this was like the episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where you find out at the end that Picard was turned into a Borg. Like this is just like the setup for the cool part that's going to happen later.
Yeah, we do get some info on the implants in this episode.
Yeah,
and they're a safety device, so that when the bioweapon comes online too early or as a threat to somebody, they can just switch it off and just kill it. So that obviously sets things up for the final issue. But yeah, you're absolutely right on the art style. I hadn't necessarily thought about it, but it's all very grey, dark green. It's under the cover of night, which I guess is appropriate, but it really takes you out of it when the last few issues, one of the best things about the last few issues of the fact was how vibrant and just eye-catching it was. So that's kind of a shame. I guess the only other notes I've got on this one, if anyone's got any more, is Sugarman finally remembers that his thing is quoting smarter people than he is after forgetting for a couple of issues, and he does it again here. That had an unwelcome return. And, for what it's worth, I think the classic BOWs, they are a bit of a cheap thing to do. They've obviously worked on me, if nothing else. But I'm glad this series doesn't delve into doing Ouroboros stuff. Being that it's kind of an RE5 tie-in, because that's Wesker's domain. You don't really need to mess with that too much. It would have been the really easy, hey, this is Resident Evil 5 connective tissue right here. But I'm actually glad that they leave that alone and do something different, even if that something different is nostalgia monsters. Anyone got any more points, or we'll move on to the final issue?
It's just the issue where, it must be because it's issue 5, isn't it? So this is the one where Giselle corners him right at the end with like a big smirk and a threat, like, I'm going to kill you now. And it's revealed that he's not only not a normal human anymore, he's like a superhuman or something.
Yeah,
Isn't
he grabs the shotgun, like firing out of his hand, judging by the panel, which is pretty impressive. Yeah, and that'll take us into the final battle, which is pretty much the synopsis of issue 6. The team infiltrate Giselle's compound, covering it with explosives and facing down the man himself. Mina Gear realizes the truth behind the satellite and the implants in the BOWs, and panic ensues. Bergs, what do you think of the final issue of the series?
Thing I wanted to be and more.
Is it?
No, it's not. I can't use the Star Trek analogy because the post. I mean, I'm making a lot of Star Trek references today because I've been watching it. But this is such a, I don't know. It's such an unsatisfying ending. It's more of the same art style from the last issue, which is again the least visually interesting to me. They do make it more interesting. Like I feel like the colors in this issue are brighter. In terms of like what's going on in the book, it feels like it feels like trying to find the right word for it. Like the words they're saying don't matter.
Yeah.
Like we're just here to string along these panels together, with more of Mina's boobs.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in this one. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming I understand what's going on in the story here, but I'm not even necessarily sure, to be honest, because there's a bunch of stuff that I'm like, well, where did that go? So the whole point of, they mentioned the mystery satellite, right, that has G-monsters on it they should go clear up.
Yeah.
I think the twist is meant to be that is where a signal is coming from that satellite that is stopping BOWs from attacking. So if they interrupt by blowing up the compound that they are rigging with explosives and stop the signal, it will then send all the... It's like a stop switch rather than a kill switch. So it will cease the stop switch. All the zombies will come to life. All the monsters will come to life and be released on major areas and kill a bunch of people. I don't really know why the satellite is full of G mutants and stuff, apparently. Like, what's that got to do with anything? Okay.
Yeah.
I draw you back to my line of what exactly is this man's plan?
Yeah, kind of.
It's I mean the opening shot is you see that newer man is a new man who's very powerful, and then he unveils his deadly creation to kill the evil BSAA, and it's just zombie dogs.
I did laugh at that.
Well, you had hunters in the last issue. Now you're throwing Cerberuses. Uber hounds? No, the thing that take away from me for this issue is like, yes, they've set bombs around the compound. Sorry for this revelation, everybody. That if they blow up, they are going to unleash like basically a bioweapon Armageddon because, of course, stakes. That's apparently his plan: is to store monsters around the globe and do nothing with them until someone attacks him.
I can't fault that. That's probably it's fair.
That's Tony Stark. Not a great plan. Like it's. But the big takeaway for me is that Sugarman had a secret this entire time. He's got the noisy cricket from Men in Black.
I was going to say.
Like some kind of Deus Ex Machina microwave gun which defeats G-monsters instantly, sort of. But then unkillable G-mutant monster man gets decapitated by a sword. So, well, I say sword, it's a combat knife. It's Resident Evil. You know how these things go. I'm getting a bit of a weird one on the stakes front.
To plot out what Steve's talking about there, yes, Newman, because he's infected, can heal. It's got like super fast healing because I guess, it's a G virus, so that is arguably logical. And yes, Holiday Sugarman busts out this crazy weapon which like literally blows up his insides to kill him. Then, apropos of nothing, he comes back as a monster, Newman, and the way to kill him that time is just to cut his head off. Okay. Well, I guess he doesn't have any insides at this point. It's just a brain. I don't know, but sure.
Well, that bit from Village where you see Ethan's hand and it's actually just all mold.
Yes.
He's just all Newman
insides.
Yeah. Honestly, like this one felt, obviously it has a ticking timer of the bomb and the implications that if this bomb goes off, the world is going to end. And then the bomb goes off and the world doesn't end because just a few moments later, oh, it's all right, I fixed it by hacking the things off screen. Like, oh, Christ. That was the bit that really annoyed me the most, I think, is the fact that Mina solved it off screen. It didn't get really a chance to show her being cool. Instead, we had Sugarman fighting monsters, and Sugarman's guys getting pulverized by monsters.
Yeah, especially since, as we just applauded them throughout this entire episode of putting her sort of front and centre and letting her lead issues and start with her stuff, the end of the story just comes down to big burly man punches monsters to death, essentially. Punches with knife, admittedly, but punches all the same. I did think that actually, he's not a de-aged version, he's a clone, was an okay-ish twist I didn't see coming. I mean, it's pointless, isn't it? Because there isn't any more to this, so it's going to go nowhere. And also, as we've alluded to, he didn't really have a plan in the first place, so it doesn't really seem
the real
that much
Fritz
of a
Giesel
threat.
denies all knowledge. Just goes, it wasn't me, but I'll give you some money to the people who have suffered because of him.
Yeah.
I'm not evil.
Yeah. So, not with a bang, but with a whimper, I suppose, when it comes to issue 6. It seems to be the general feeling. Ironically, because yes, the compound does explode, but whimper all the same. Okay, then let's round this off with a couple more points, which is just to more specifically hone in on the characters, I guess of which there are like 3 real characters in this, and then the red shirts, some of which do get a little bit of personality, as you said, towards the end, but I don't really think they count. I certainly don't have any notes on anyone. Hell, my note for the villain is just bad guy, I guess, and that's it. But Redhead Quiztis is a bit of a Mary Sue, as we said, young, adaptable, smart. She does get put down by her seniors, but she's the real hero because she's read books. She's fine. I don't like the term Mary Sue and throwing it around too much, but yeah, aside from doing her job properly, if she was a rebel, she'd basically be Alice. That's basically how you know if someone's a Mary Sue or not. And to be fair, Chris Midbeard, as I put here, is equally infuriating. Because apparently he's an estranged dad. That's not really relevant to the story, but it's in there. He's kind of a prick. He's deeply unlikable. It's cool to see someone in that outfit, as I said, but more generic than the most generic action hero you can think of. He's got a funny looking beard and his family don't like him. Whoopee doo. Yeah. Bergs, what did you make of the characters in Resident Evil?
See, you say Chris, what was it?
Chris Midbeard.
Chris Midbeard. I say British Barry.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah, they just randomly, like 3 issues in, go, oh, he's British, by the way. Look, he said bloody hell. I was like,
she says something about like tea and biscuits.
Yes. And you're like, oh, he's meant to be British.
And he says, your British accent's terrible. And it's like, how do you... Because we're reading it, not hearing it. But it was a funny moment that stood out to me. I was like, okay, cool. They're talking.
You'll never be David Trapp.
No, right?
So... I mean, I like Mina. I wish that Mina got as much screen time as her boobs did.
Nice.
Because like she is cool. She's 22. She has that whole like hacker thing going on where it's like you work for us, you're gonna go to jail. Because the government has predatory hiring practices. But whatever. They get along at the end. I would watch more misadventures with these two. But like you said, the villain was we've had German Resident Evil villain, haven't we?
Possibly, but I can't actually think of anyone.
Fire and Ice. I'm sure in Fire and Ice the main villain is an ex-Nazi.
Let me look.
Because like I was like, we've had a lot of like we've had Spaniard villain, we've had Italian villain,
Russian
villain,
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn villain.
It's time for an Australian villain.
Yes, I want a villain that's gonna come in and say good day. No. So it was like saw German villain. That was neat. Resident Evil in space. We got to see what that would be like, and to see that matter was addressed somehow. All in all, it was a fun action film, an Elseworlds tale, if you will. We'll never see these people again, but I gotta tell you, if they did pick up a second like arc of 6 issues, I probably would. I actually own all of these issues, by the way.
Nice.
I actually own these books. Overall, cool. To me, a better experience than the manhwa was, just because I think that this was a little bit tighter.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, no. If I was going to give it a number, I would probably say, gosh, 6.5 out of 10. Like, kind of okay.
Yeah.
But I also read a lot of comic books and I'm picky, so.
Steve, to your credit, yes, you seem to be correct. There was Klaus, the Umbrella agent in Fire and Ice. I think the bad guy is Dexter Whitlam, isn't it? It's the guy from...
Oh, God, the nerd who turned evil.
Yeah,
or was evil, but went
the guy
worse.
that you bullied him and then he turned into an Umbrella guy or whatever. But I don't know if that was... I don't think he's German, but there was related to that in Fire and Ice. You're absolutely right. It's surprising that we haven't had anything closer to canon with German villains before, admittedly. But there you go. I guess it ticked a box in that sense. Steve, any thoughts on the characters?
I know I called Mina and Mary Sue earlier, and I apologise. But now, as far as OCs go, I've seen worse in the Resident Evil fandom.
This is true.
You got to, again, as I said off the top, like the fact that we have like wonderkins like Leon Kennedy, Claire Redfield, Rebecca Chambers, all very young, all very super talented, can do all these things at very young ages. Yeah, okay, Chris and Jill were reasonably of age, but they're like mid-20s compared to these when their adventure started. So it's fine, honestly. There are bits that are puzzling, but she's also the only real character because Holiday Sugarman is crap one-liners, action, and Deus Ex Machina bombs. That's it. That's all he is. You take him out, replace him with anybody. He could be Barry. He could be Chris. He could be Carlos. He could be literally any of them. That's how generic this man is. He's just got a British accent. At first I actually thought he was Barry, and then he opened his mouth. That's how bad he is. As for anyone else, like Si said, really, there's only one other character, and that's the villain, who, credit to him, he has no plan. And that in itself is a plan more compelling than just burn the world down for the heck of it. But why? Why do we have this world-ending like G-Virus plan that's just make monsters and hide them in a closet until someone tries to kill me? Why do we have helicopters dropping zombies on small villages that we've also cleared out to make the zombies in the first place? It's just evil for evilness' sake, which is surprisingly a bit naff in a charming way.
He did promise he'd return them home.
That's what it was.
It's a bit naff in a charming way, which leads me back round to, when I said this looks a lot like a 90s Spider-Man and X-Men cartoon, very evocative of those kind of like vibes, which is trashy, it's not very classy, but still kind of enjoyable. And out of all the WildStorm comics, bar maybe, the manhwa, which is actually a plot retelling of Code Veronica, this may well be the strongest.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's terrifying to say, isn't it? But out of all the original characters they threw at us, besides maybe the zookeeper who then became immune to T-viruses and then gets jobbed off when he comes back, this is surprisingly the most coherent, I feel, with the WildStorm OCs. And, we had Resident Evil in space, and while it is cringe, it's not terrible.
Yeah.
That's fair. I think, what you're saying about apologising for calling her a Mary Sue and Chris, I nearly called him Chris Midfield. Holiday Sugarman could have been anyone, and Mary Sue's at least better than a lot of OCs. But you know what? If you'd put Ada Wong in this comic, it would have been worse. So I'll give it that much. She's a better version of that character. Anyway, any excuse to put dirt on that coffin. Let's talk a bit about BOWs before we finish as well, because we touched on them as we went through. But did anybody have any particular highlights from original stuff or stuff that you were happy to see back, or what do you think did the best or the worst, that kind of thing? Steve, what are your standouts, highlights and lowlights on the monsters from this? Because monsters maketh the comic with Resident Evil sometimes.
It's the unique ones to me, like not Chaos and arguably not so much the Crimson Lads, but the Octobrain and the Hellgas Tyrant, the super sold out and Tyrant. The aesthetic look neat, right? Everything else kind of stock. Even Giselle, when he goes into his second form, kind of looks a bit like the Octobrain, just with his head as opposed to, G eyes and a weird face.
Yeah.
That being said, the classic monsters, when they are there, they look as they should. They just get pulverized rather quickly. Like, I think we don't actually see a hunter do anything except get shot to bits of things.
Yeah. That's the problem with having so many in there. Like, as much as you might pine, where's this, where's that, and whatever, if you find something like an Infinite Darkness at the beginning, maybe as an example, where it had very few different POWs throughout, But the problem is when you just start throwing so many into the mix, they're in there for a couple of panels and then they're gone. So it kind of becomes irrelevant at that point. But it was nice to see them, absolutely. I land somewhat similar to you. I think the new G-Virus monsters are kind of dull, and the story's kind of unfocused to the point where I ask myself, do they even need to be G creatures? Is there any point for that? You could argue they do because, Giselle does his whole healing factor thing, which is very G-Virus. But because the story is all over the place and he doesn't have a plan, you don't really tie those things together particularly well. So they could have just been generic monsters at any point, the Crimson Lads and whatever. But some of the new stuff is really good, as you pointed out, like the Tyrants and stuff like that. Make for some fun face-offs. Bergs, any particular highlights and lowlights?
Excuse me. In terms of highlights and lowlights, I like the Wibbly Goo Monster. Thought it was interesting. We haven't seen one quite like that before, even if it did look a little phallic. The Nazi tyrant was a cool thing to see. I appreciated that they commented that it all kind of like all of Fritz's monsters were worse than Umbrella's.
Yeah,
It's like he copied them and just didn't do as well. I think it was a fun point to have seen, and it was kind of reflected in their designs. They looked like the classic ones, but they shot them up.
Yeah, fair.
But there's also like power creep because you've had at this point 10 years of having seen those original BOWs that like obviously you're gonna be really good at killing them now. But lowlights, the zombies. I mean, zombies are cool, but like there's ultimately speaking a reason why they veer away from them in the series now, because they are really only cool en masse, and that's kind of really not that interesting to have people fight against.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, also the new stuff was neat. Sugar, the guy, the main bad guy looks pretty cool in his ultimate transformation form.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I would write it on par with the rest of this comic book. The rest of it was like a 7. It gave us a couple of new things. It brought back old things to a point where like a fan would see it and be like, oh, that's so cool. Look at that hunter. That hunter looks dope. Okay, it's dead now. Yeah, that's about where I'm at with it.
Okay, so let's do some final thoughts to close this episode up. What we think about the comic book overall. Bergs, what are your final thoughts on the entire run? Did you have a good time with it?
I did. I read this over the past couple of days. Only once. I didn't read through it a couple of times. I wasn't that interested. Overall, I thought it was neat. It was a cool comic book. I owned it, but I never read it back in the day because I got to a point when I was collecting comic books where I would just buy them and bag them and tag them and then put them in my collection. Which is why I stopped buying comics. But I was keen to read it. It felt on par for me with like what Resident Evil was at that time, where it was just bombastic and barely made any sense, and it was just there to provide a vehicle for killing waves and waves of creatures. And this was a vehicle for that. Some of the issues I thought were better than the others in terms of like art style, quality, and presentation. I think that the middle and earlier books were a little bit better. The last 3 or so had that like weird, like kind of sketchy where they looked like they were trying to be a little more edgy with it. Which when you're going bombastic and loud like that, and I think that the Resident Evil 1 comic book had a very similar like bombastic art style. Like you really want to kind of like stick with that because you change your tone in the presentation, it changes what people are perceiving about what you're writing. Like that deep, dark, sketchy, kind of moody stuff. It works really good when you're writing a book like Saga that is deep and dark and moody and like low. By Rick Remender. Yeah. So I felt like it kind of was a little bit jarring in the experience for me as a fan of the medium. As a person who notably hates Resident Evil, I didn't hate this one. Which I guess says a lot about me as a Resident Evil fan. I've always liked, like, I like when stuff is kind of silly and dumb and bombastic, and like, you know, that scene in Resident Evil, the RE3 remake, where you pull out the railgun, and it's like a handheld Kojima style railgun.
Yep.
And you just blast it with it. I need that in my life, and I think Resident Evil is better with that. So give me giant explosions in space, and at the very least, well, I won't be, like, my soul won't be fed, my eyes will be, and so will my capacity for fun.
Nice.
Again, 6.5 out of 10.
I think that's a really good point, actually, in terms of when this released and where it released alongside in terms of Resident Evil 5. Notably, the co-op Resident Evil game. And this is essentially a co-op shooter comic book, sort of, or at least it becomes that way, with these sort of opposing characters as part of the same team. So it works in that sense. It is a visual treat when it's being a visual treat and when it's not, and it juxtaposes with that ideal, as you're absolutely spot on there. It does lose a bit of luster and lose a bit of steam, and it's kind of a slog in places to get through when it's just like, it comes right down to either tell me a good story, and if you're not going to bother with a good story, just make like consistently good eye candy for me to look at. And I'm not talking about the honking badonkadonks. I'm talking about the zombie kills and stuff. And that was a bit all over the place because some of them were really, really cool. There's some really cool fights in there. And then, as you're right, like there's a real big dip before the end, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I mean, as Steve said earlier, it might be one of the better WildStorm releases. I think he's right. At the beginning of the show, I talked about the consistency in the art style, and whilst it does fluctuate in terms of what that style actually is, it has like a certain ceiling and a certain floor. It doesn't drop off into absolute terribleness like some of the comics do. It doesn't get into like true greatness or anything. None of the comics have so far. Maybe the Code Veronica one for all the wrong reasons, right? But it doesn't.
Alfred's chin.
Yeah, Alfred's chin. But it doesn't drop right off like Infinite Darkness at the beginning did very early on and never picked back up. Steve, what are your final thoughts on this WildStorm run, and is it, in fact, the best of the lot?
Yeah, okay, so as I've said, like probably the strongest besides the manhwa, but that is an oddly low bar to field because realistically, out of the original set, the only one that really sticks with me is the retelling of the Keeper's Diary. And even then, that's been done by other people now, and there's still actually kind of a compelling tale when it's framed. So the quality of the tale can be done justice by anybody. No, that's probably not the right way to say it. No, I'm not trying to throw WildStorm under the bus because they obviously had a way, an idea, and that was basically let's do zombies in space and then do weird German Nazi lab man. Also, Mina is there for some reason. Honestly, this one, I'm trying to give it a fair shake. It's okay, but it's like it's beating Infinite Darkness. That's not really hard. Like, you know, it's beating Fire and Ice again. Not really that hard. Like, and that's only because it has at least a beginning, middle, and end, and it has characters that are consistent throughout. Like, you know, Sugarman's boring action man. Mina is hacker girl who also has a bit of a side gig of being having a heart, caring about things, and that's it. Resident Evil deserves better. That's the thing that actually is annoying me a bit now, because I feel like I mentioned earlier David Trapp, you know, SD Perry stuff. I know a lot of people pull that and elevate it. I have to agree. Like, that's still probably the best not main game works for Resident Evil. And that frustrates me, because comics is a great medium for it. The BOWs do genuinely look amazing in this. The story they're in does not.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Unfortunately, as we reach the end of WildStorm's run, we've done 4 of these, and we're yet to find the thing that, as you say, I guess Resident Evil deserves to be, and Infinite Darkness, the beginning as well, on top of that. But there is more ground to cover. There will be more comic clubs in the future. We have Heavenly Island, which is the beach episode, but like it's not an episode, it's a million issues long to cover. We've not done Mahawa Desire yet, which is the school episode, I think. There's also the other manhwas as well, if we wanted to, if there were English translations for 2 and 3, and there might be some other stuff as well. So this, I guess, at the point where if you've listened this late into the podcast, I put it to you, dear listener, please let us know on the Discord server, in FAS discussion, or on the YouTube comment if you're listening on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, there's Spotify comments now on podcasts where you can leave a comment on an episode, which is really cool. Do leave us a comment where you can about what comic you'd like us to cover next. Should we do more of the manhwas, or should we do Heavenly Island and Mahawa Desire, which are the Japanese mangas? But yeah, that's going to do it for Wildstorm, and that's going to do it for episode 92 of the show. Nothing else remains for me but to thank the panel, our contributors, and our community. Join us on the First Aid Spray Discord server to hear the show early, and check out our merch store or our Patreon to support the show. Don't forget that these and all of our social media links can be found at faspraypod.com. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcasting apps. And if you like what you hear, please do leave us a review where you can and spread the good word. In the next episode, we'll be retrospectively reviewing the final missing Biohazard CGI flick from our Film Club catalogue, as we, of course, team up to show off our gung fu with 2017's Resident Evil Vendetta. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all the Pueblo people on social media. We're all on Blue Sky. I'm at SciWhite, Steve is at FB Steve, and Bergs is at Biblically Correct. And finally, thank you for listening, and have a good week.
It's okay. Why don't we be like the BSAA and send a rookie into space? What the f*** am I reading? Which audibly said a few times, just as a prelude to the podcast. This is the pre-roll, everybody. Oh God,
That's the subtitle of this podcast.
what the f*** am I reading?